Hey everyone, welcome to U7-L5 Women in Middle Ages in the Eastern Orthodox Church. So I guess my camera just doesn't want to work today. That's okay, not a problem. So your job, today is a little bit different. So I don't have any necessarily like vocabulary terms for you that I usually put in red text. Instead, it's going to be kind of a mix between questions that I'm just going to ask you that I just want you to answer on the Ed puzzle. But also, there is going to be 4 questions that I ask you that you need to write down the answers to them on your study guide. I will make it super clear of when you need to do that. Um, so, yeah, a little different today. So, learning targets, you're going to identify the role of women of upper and lower classes, um, identify laws directed at women in the Middle Ages, describe the similarities and differences between Western Europe and the Byzantine Empire, and describe the similarities and differences between Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. So, this presentation, there's part 1, which is Women in the Middle Ages, part 2, Eastern Orthodox Church. It's the same video. I just want to let you know that I'd like switch topics partway through. So we're going to start with part 1, which is Women in the Middle Ages. So, why were women labeled inferior in the Middle Ages? Hmm. So, Middle Age Europe was highly influenced by Christianity, so both in religion and in laws. Popes, priests, and men in power deemed women inferior. A lot of this stems from the biblical story of Adam and Eve. If you don't know the biblical story, Adam and Eve were like, according to Christianity, they're like the first people to like inhabit the earth. I'm sure there's like Wikipedia page about it or something like that that you can go read it off of. But what it was, so Eve, who was the first woman, she gave an apple to Adam, who was the first man. And this apple was like a forbidden apple. And she was the one that gave it to Adam, and then together they gained sin. And this is a very common theme in medieval art. Also, ruling men thought women should be like the Virgin Mary, who was the mother of Jesus according to Christianity. And the Virgin Mary would be religious, devoted to God, and would raise kids. So, besides upper class, women were typically not literate. And to be honest, peasant men weren't literate either. So, what that means is that they weren't able to read or write, so there was no trading of ideas long distances. So let's say like a peasant woman or a man had like a really cool idea for, I don't know, preserving food. Okay. So maybe that information would be spread among their villages, their neighbors, maybe the surrounding villages. But after that, it wouldn't spread very far because there's no way for them to write it down and have that knowledge spread through generations and overland. So, just like ancient Rome, much of Middle Age history was written by men. Okay, there are some examples of women's written work. You're actually going to read one in the next lesson that we do. It's a medieval fairy tale that a woman wrote. It's a pretty good one. I find it interesting. But anyway, so this is a question I just want you to answer on the Ed puzzle. Okay, don't write this one down. This is just an Ed puzzle question. What do you think was the roles of wealthy women in Middle Europe? So, if a woman was of the ruling class, they had a little bit of power, so they could negotiate marriages for political alliances. They also typically kept and archived collections of books. This was very helpful because it helped keep history together. It also helped share ideas among upper class women by trading these books with each other. And these women would also influence what the men in their household read. Be like, oh, hey, dear, I read this really good book. Here, you should read it too. That's kind of how that went down. All right. They also had influence on husbands about laws. They could influence the economy by purchasing luxuries and deciding what gifts to give visiting aristocrats. So let's say if a woman had a friend coming in from a faraway village, and that woman was like, "Hey, I bought this really cool new pair of shoes that my village made. You should try them out." And then that visiting woman would go back to the village and be like, "Oh my gosh, these shoes are amazing. Let's order a bunch of them." That's kind of how they would like influence the economy. It didn't have to be about shoes, by the way. I just said shoes because I could. Whatever. Okay. So also, if a woman's parents were wealthy, um, she could have a high position in the church as a nun. So any social class could become a nun. So a nun is like a holy woman in the Christian church. Um, but if she had wealthy parents and they gave her money when she became a nun, that woman could like hold a really high position in the like nun convent. Anyway, all right. So, young girls were educated in running a household and how to read and write. Most of the time, they were taught through the Bible and also biographies of the saints of how to read and write. They also wrote letters to each other. A lot of these letters, especially the ones that survive today, are friendship letters because you can't, there's no cars, you can't just hop in the car and go see your friend in the next town. You'd have to send letters to each other because they couldn't socialize in person daily. And letters were also sent for invitations, like if you're having a Christmas party or something, and also to send gifts. And these letters were also great at learning foreign languages through others. So let's say, like, a noblewoman in Italy wrote a letter to a noblewoman in Germany. They could, like, exchange and practice their language skills. Women could also send love letters, and they were educated in foreign languages, specifically French and Latin. So, um, other little social etiquettes of wealthy women in the Middle Ages included that in public they were to take tiny, elegant steps. Yes, because they had to look elegant at all times. I know, kind of strange, right? But at social gatherings, they also had to talk about their love for dogs, hunting, birds, music, and love. I know, all the great subjects, right? And women could actually hunt alongside men, which was kind of cool. Um, they didn't use bow or arrows like men would do. Again, Middle Ages is kind of you're starting to see the making of like firearms, but women typically hunted with falcons, which is, to be honest, like super cool. Women were also forced to tend to men. So, for example, daughters and knights would have to bathe any male guest that came to stay at their dad's house. Ew. All right, question one. This is what you need to write in your study guide, okay? Write the answer to this in your study guide. What were the roles of wealthy women? Give at least three examples. All right, this question, just answer on the ed puzzle. What do you think were the roles of women who were peasants or of the working class? So, women's roles, specifically if they were peasants or, in like the lower classes. So, once married, they're the ones who are managing the household. But they did have also outside jobs as well, like harvesting fields with the men. There's a statue of women cleaning flax, which is a type of grain. The really kind of well, this surprised me when I found out. But women could actually work in certain guilds. If you don't know what a guild is, it's an association of craftsmen. Um, they couldn't work in all types of guilds. There was just certain ones, mostly dress and hat making. So they couldn't do like metalworking or woodworking or anything like that. Uh, they could also work in textile industry, such as spinning wool, sewing, weaving, and spinning silk. And if a man came into like the guild and he didn't have a job, that man would take the place of a woman's job. So, like, let's say there's a woman working there and a man walked in and he's like, "Hey, I need a job." And the boss would come over and be like, "Okay, you, lady, you're fired. And then the man would take over her job. Yeah, crazy. They also worked in textiles, but usually wore terrible clothes. So they would make the clothes, but they couldn't actually afford to buy them and wear them for themselves because they were super overworked, but super underpaid. So, question number two, write this down in your study guide. What were the roles of peasant slash working class women? And give me at least two examples. All right, this one, just answer on the Ed puzzle. Do you think laws in the Middle Age Europe empowered women or disempowered women? Why or why not? So, laws and women. So, women solely could not inherit land and wealth. Okay? So, they could inherit land and wealth, but it had to be controlled by their husband. So, let's say, for example, there was a daughter. Her dad died. Her dad had a lot of land. So, once the dad died, she got a portion of that land. Now, that was her land, but she could not do anything with it without her husband's permission. Okay? The husband would be in control of her land. The husband also had to get consent from the wife if he ever wanted to sell her land. So the wife did have a little tiny bit of say into her land, but not much. Women could make decisions over land if the husband was off to war. A really prime example of this would be in 1066, William the Conqueror, who is the King of England. He went to war, and his wife, Matilda, made laws and decisions over his land while he was gone. Yeah, that's pretty cool. She's in England while he's off to war. So, if a knight or lord went to war and they died, the wife could take over his feudal land, but there were some restrictions about that. So, the first one would be like she could never bear arms, so she could never carry a sword, or when firearms came out, she could not carry any of that kind of stuff. She also could not appear in court without her brother or father. Also, in the Middle Ages, husbands were allowed to beat wives if she did a misdoing. If she was innocent, though, the man was publicly humiliated. And in some regions, the wife could also beat the husband back. Yeah, relationships were not great in the Middle Ages. All right, question three. Write this in your study guide. What were laws like in the Middle Ages towards women? Give at least two examples. All right, women with power. So here's some examples that I found. So in 900 to about 1200 in Salerno, Italy, women were actually allowed to study medicine, which is pretty cool. Most of these women who study medicine were midwives. If you don't know what a midwife is, it's like a lady who helps other ladies give birth. And the Byzantine Empire also had gynecological anatomy records. But the unfortunate part of it is women typically couldn't read Latin. So Latin was usually used in the Byzantine Empire. So if like a woman from England wanted to learn about the Byzantine Empire's medicine, she probably couldn't read it because it's in Latin. An example would be this lady, her name's Sarah. She was a Jewish doctor from Marseilles, France, and she took in and actually trained a male doctor for 7 months, and that was back in 1326. All right, so here's some examples of women with power. You have Empress Engelberga, Matilda of Tuscany, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Blanche of Castile, Melisendre of Jerusalem, Joan of Arc. We'll talk about Joan of Arc later, by the way. Um, but I'm just going to focus on the story of Eleanor of Aquitaine because she has a pretty cool story. So she was a French princess, and people loved her because she had a very strong and charismatic personality. Unfortunately, her father died, and when he died, he didn't have any male heirs. He died back in 1137. So she was the sole inheritor of the throne. But she only got that because she agreed to marry Louis VII. During this time, she was 15 and he was 16. So Louis VII and her were like, hey, you know what? There's this crusade coming up. And if you don't know what a crusade is, it's a type of war. We should go together. Let's go check it out together. Let's go to Jerusalem. That sounds like fun. So that's what they did. They went on this war campaign together. Of course, she didn't fight. She was just there to observe. And during the crusade, Louis VII was super unhappy with her, so he ended up divorcing her in 1152. And during this time period, they had kids, but they only had daughters. They didn't have any sons. So Eleanor was like angry, so she wanted to get back to France as soon as possible. But on her way back to France, there were some people plotting to kidnap her. So noblemen attempted to kidnap her and marry her because they're like, hey, if we kidnap her and marry her, that means we're the king of France because she's the sole queen of France. Um, so she traveled all the way to Poitiers, France, which at that point was under the control of England. And there she was saved by Duke Henry Plantagenet from being kidnapped by all those noblemen who wanted to marry her and take the throne for themselves. So she ended up marrying Duke Henry. And later on, Henry actually became the King of England in 1154, so she married a very powerful man. And all of France's land now came under England's rule. Dun dun dun, which did not make the French happy at all. She saw this as a revenge for the nobles who wanted to kidnap and marry her. So we have the King of France, or no, sorry, the King of England marrying the Queen of France, and together they rule both under one monarchy. And together they had 5 sons. So, unfortunately, Henry was cheating on Eleanor with a mistress. Eleanor got mad and she fled the castle. One of her favorite sons, his name is Richard the Lionhearted, he went off to battle, and she actually was given control by Richard to rule his lands for 4 years while he was off to battle. So she still had power. Richard got captured in 1194, and Eleanor was the one that paid most of the ransom to get him freed. She would then retire to a convent. A convent is where nuns live, and died at the very old age of 82, which was like crazy old for the Middle Ages. So here is the tomb of Eleanor. You can visit it in England today. All right, so women in the clergy. So nuns and other religious women also had a lot of power. I didn't talk about them because I'm just running out of time with this video. But if you want to learn more, you can let me know. Oh, okay. So a lot of the information I got was from this one book that I got from the library. This is the front cover of the book, and I think it's like the most hilarious thing ever. I have to have some fun while I make these slideshows. I just think like the like look on their faces, they're like, "What? I'm really dancing with you." She's like, "Seriously? Like, can your tights get any tighter, dude? Come on." Uh, I think it's funny. Anyway, all right, let's move on. Next, we're going to talk about the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Byzantine Empire. So, what we talked about, so we talked about the Byzantine Empire a little bit. I'm just abbreviating it to BE in this slideshow because it's just easier to type. So again, the Byzantine Empire was abandoned, or they abandoned the western part of the old Roman Empire. The reason for this is because there was too many Germanic or local tribes trying to take over the West, and they're just like, oh my gosh, this is just too much of a liability. We don't have enough military force to maintain it. Let's just totally abandon the western part of the Roman Empire. So they left the city of Rome and the Pope behind. But the Byzantine Empire still considered themselves a part of the Roman Empire, and they felt very, very betrayed by Pope Leo when he crowned Charlemagne the Roman Emperor in 800, which I know we learned about last lesson. So here's a map of the Byzantine Empire. You can see here it goes into parts of southern Italy, goes into like the Balkans, Greece, and all the way here into Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey. The Byzantine Empire was always ruled by an emperor or an empress. It was not fractured up into tiny little kingdoms like the West was. It also did not have feudalism until the mid 800s. The reason why that kind of breaks is because in the 800s, the economy became really, really bad. So poor farmers couldn't afford the land and the tax of the land that they farmed on, so they had to sell their farmland to nobles, hence starting feudalism. So the Byzantine Empire tried to stop feudalism from being the norm. Emperor Romanus I Lecapenus signed a law in 922 and 935 to ban feudalism, but unfortunately, after his death, the Byzantine Empire went back to feudalism. Just because the Byzantine Empire totally abandoned Western Europe does not mean that all ties were severed. There was frequent contact between Western Europe and the Byzantine Empire. For example, Byzantine Empire Prince Romanus II married a noble from Italy in 944. There's also the exchanging of ideas, such as medical and historical texts. Also, technologies. For example, papermaking was a really big technology that the Islamic Caliphate, who at the time ruled Spain, they introduced that to Western Europe, and then Western Europe introduced that to the Byzantine Empire. So there was exchange of technology. Both of them had to fight off foreign rivals. They both fended off the large Umayyad Caliphate. I'll show you a map of what the Umayyad Caliphate is on the next slide. But pretty much it's a Islamic kingdom, and it was very, very powerful during the Middle Ages. The West also fought with each other, especially England and France. They hated each other's guts. And the Byzantine Empire also fought the Bulgars and the Turks. So here's a map of the Umayyad Caliphate that I was talking about. So again, it's like an Islamic kingdom. You can see that it stretches into Europe, especially in Spain and Portugal, down here all the way through North Africa into like what modern day Saudi Arabia is. Up here, you can see it's bordering with the Byzantine Empire. So it has parts of Turkey, and then goes even parts into Asia. So it's huge. So, the splitting of the churches. This is probably one of the most important things that happened during the Middle Ages. So, between Constantine's reign, Constantine, if you remember back from our Roman Empire unit, he was the Roman emperor in the 300s, and he was the guy who legalized Christianity. So, between him and about 1054, the Catholic Church was unified for both the Western Europe and the Byzantine Empire. So everyone, or not everyone, but pretty much everyone in Western Europe and the Byzantine Empire were Catholic. And then this thing happened. It's called the Great Schism, and that happened in 1054, and that's where the Catholic Church split into two. Okay, one half is the Roman Catholic Church, and they're going to be based in Western Europe. Okay, their capital is also going to be Rome, Italy. The other section would be the Eastern Orthodox Church, and that would be in the East, meaning the Byzantine Empire. And the capital would be in Constantinople. Today, Constantinople is known as Istanbul, Turkey. And it is still this way today. So you can see a map here. Here's the Great Schism. You can see the changing of the colors on the map. So again, to the west, you have the Catholic Church. Okay? So that's covering, again, like Spain, Germany, France, England, all that stuff. And then to the east, you have the Orthodox Church. Okay, so that is covering parts of like Russia, Greece, Turkey, all that. So there are four main reasons why the church split into two in 1054. I'm going to go through all four of them. The first one is that the Pope Leo crowned Charlemagne in 800, and the Byzantine Empire saw this as treason. Okay, they were not happy with this. Two, this this reason It sounds kind of ridiculous, I'm not going to lie, but it was a huge deal back in the Middle Ages. So, it was the use of unleavened bread in communion. So, unleavened bread means that it's bread without yeast. Okay, so yeast makes bread rise. If you ever made bread, you'd probably know that. So, the West wanted no yeast in their bread when they take communion. But the East wanted yeast in their bread when they took communion. And if you don't know what communion is, it's a sacrament in the Christian churches. So, yeah, seriously, that was one of the main reasons why the church split, is because of yeast. Number three, the wording of the Nicene Creed. What the Nicene Creed is the declaration of what specifically Christians believe in. The main points of the Nicene Creed include that there are three parts of God. There's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, according to Christianity. Also, Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary, and Jesus was crucified, died, and rose to heaven. This is all according to the Christian Church. You can see here, here I just put in an image of the Nicene Creed. I'm not going to read it out loud because we'd be here all day, but if you're interested, you can read it. And the fourth reason is if priests should be married or not. So Eastern Orthodox, okay, that's the Byzantine Empire one. They're like, yeah, priests can get married, sure, sounds great. Roman Catholic, that would be in the West, they cannot be married. They're like, nope, Jesus wasn't married, so priests can't get married either. All right, to this day, there is still split into Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox religions, but it's not exclusively to just the East or West anymore. You can find both of these religions across the globe. Their leaders are also a lot more on friendly terms now. So the ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople would be the leader of Eastern Orthodox. So again, that's would be in the East, and the Pope is the leader of a Roman Catholic Church, would be West. So today, the leader of the Eastern Orthodox Church is Ecumenical Bartholomew the First. Here's a picture of him right here. And for Roman Catholics, it's Pope Francis. And you can find both of these types of churches in Minnesota today. So, for example, Roman Catholic churches, you have like Mary Queen of Peace, which is in Rogers. The super cool cathedral in St. Paul, that's near the Capitol. It's pretty neat to see. Also, the Church of St. Andrew in Elk River, that's also Roman Catholic. And an example of an Eastern Orthodox would be St. Michael's Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is located in Minneapolis. And here. So, question number 4, write this in your study guide in 3 to 4 sentences or bullet points. Summarize the differences between Western Europe and the Byzantine Empire and why the Catholic Church split into the Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodox Church. All right, wrap up. Today we covered a lot. We did the roles of women, especially wealthy women, peasants and working class, laws of women, Eleanor of Aquitaine, differences and similarities between Western Europe and the Byzantine Empire, and also the Great Schism. Next up, you are going to do U7-L6, Women's Writing in the Middle Ages. Again, this is kind of like a cool, dark fairy tale written by a woman in the Middle Ages. You'll learn about her. And make sure that you also do the ACAPS with this reading as well. If you need help, hey, let me know. I'm here to help you, okay? After you do U7-L6, you're going to do U7-L7, U7-L8, and U7-L9, the Dark Ages, Part 1, 2, and 3. What those are is a documentary from the History Channel that I split up into 3 different sections that you're going to watch. So yay, it's not a video that I made. You can take a break from me. So typically I grade your ed puzzles if you take an educated test, but for lessons 7, 8, and 9, it's going to be different. It's going to be multiple choice on those videos, and I will be grading on what you get right and wrong. So just FYI on that. After you're done with that, you're going to go on to U7-L10, the power of the church, and that's a video I make, so I'll see you back for that. All right, again, let us know if you have questions. We are here to help you. All right, that's all I got for you. Bye.